In the Game of Thrones books, the northern plotlines have expanded constantly, and in the Winds of Winter, strange characters will converge, chaos will unfold, and the magic of fire may be met with the freezing cold. This video will look at all the plotlines coexisting in the north of Westeros at the current point of the story. It will be organized by plotline as well, as we look at where all our characters are and make some predictions about where they may go. Before examining our first plotline, let's briefly remind ourselves who is where. Starting at the Wall, we have a dead Jon Snow with Ghost, all the Night's Watchmen, all the wildlings who Jon let pass through the Wall, and Queen Selyse and Princess Shireen Baratheon with their group, including Melisandre. Beyond the Wall, the Weeper has a host of wildlings north of the Shadow Tower. Bran, Meera, Jojen, and Hodor are with the Children of the Forest in Bloodraven's cave. Benjen Stark is missing, perhaps somewhere, or perhaps dead. And we have the wildlings who are trapped at Hardhome in need of rescue. Near Winterfell, we have King Stannis and his army. Asha and Theon Greyjoy are also in his camp. In Winterfell, we have Roose and Ramsay Bolton, their army, and their allies, including Lady Dustin, Wyman Manderly, some Freys, half the Umbers, and several more houses. Camped right outside Winterfell, hidden by the winter storm, is Mors Umber and his very small, very young army. On the road from Stannis' camp to the Wall, we have Sir Justin Massey escorting Tycho Nestoris back to the Iron Bank of Braavos. Massey plans to leave fake Arya, who is really Jane Poole, at Castle Black to be safe with her supposed brother, Jon Snow. Alysane Mormont travels with them to be fake Arya's companion at the Wall. In the northeast, Davos Seaworth is traveling to the island of Skagos, where Rickon Stark and Osha the Wildling have been living since they parted ways with Bran. South of Winterfell, Dagmer Cleftjaw holds Torrhen Square. Howland Reed is floating around the swampy neck in his moving castle, possibly joined by Mage Mormont and Galbraith Glover. Let's start with the biggest plotline first, Jon Snow. Melisandre sees daggers in the dark in her fire, and then the vision comes true when those daggers end up in Jon's neck, belly, and shoulder. She also sees Jon in her flames. Now he was a man, now a wolf, now a man again. She sees Jon turning into a wolf, which could support the theory that right before Jon died, he warged into his direwolf. After all, Ghost was Jon's final word, just like Greywind was Robb's final word. Maybe Jon slipped into Ghost's skin, and his soul remains in his wolf until his human body can be resurrected. Jon's body might be stored in an ice cell. These are introduced in Book 3 as a holding cell for Jon when he returns from beyond the Wall, and Jon uses them in Book 5 to preserve wildling corpses. Maester Aemon says, "Fire consumes, but cold preserves," when talking about the Wall. However, in Jon's final chapter, we read that the ice cells holding Cregan Karstark and his men have been buried in snow. So if Jon's corpse is being preserved in an ice cell, we know it will take 10 stewards and 10 spades to clear out the snow, along with the help of one, a giant. Seems like a tall order, but unless Jon gets resurrected right away, his body needs to be frozen before it begins to decompose. Maybe the ice magic of the Wall itself can delay decomposition, but the status of Jon's corpse is a gray area. The most common theory is that the sacrifice of Shireen will be connected to Jon's resurrection. In A Song of Ice and Fire, only death can pay for life. This is obviously true for blood magic, like when Mirri Mazdoor's death, and potentially Dany's subconscious sacrifice of her infant son, Rhaego, resulted in the life of Dany's 3 stone dragon eggs. But this is also true with R'hllor-style fire magic. Beric Dondarrion dies after administering the last kiss to Catelyn Stark, bringing her back to life. So if Jon's getting his life back, it needs to be paid for with death. We're almost certain that Shireen will be burned alive in the books. According to George R.R. Martin, Shireen's death was one of the plot points he directly gave to the Game of Thrones showrunners. along with King Bran and Hodor's hold the door moment. Specifically, Martin referred to it as Stannis' decision to burn his daughter. It has to be Stannis who makes the decision to burn Shireen. It can't be Melisandre or Selyse who do it in Stannis' absence. Given that Stan is preoccupied with the Battle of Ice near Winterfell, which we'll discuss soon, he won't be able to come back to Castle Black at the start of the Winds of Winter. It'll take him a while, meaning Jon will probably stay dead until Stannis comes back. Melisandre's prophecy about Azor Ahai states that he will wake dragons from stone. She convinces Stannis that he might actually awaken a stone dragon. But Melisandre admits that while her visions are true, her own interpretations can be wrong. When she mistakes Alice Karstark for Arya Stark, the Grey Girl riding a dying horse, Melisandre tells Jon her reading was false. So maybe her reading about the stone dragon is also false. It won't be a literal dragon Stannis awakens, rather a metaphorical dragon. Jon is a dragon because Rhaegar, Lyanna, something something. He will be awakened when Shireen's stone, grayscaled face is burned alive. Shireen's death will pay for Jon's life and wake a dragon from stone. In that same conversation between Melisandre and Jon, she tells him, "I am as mortal as you, Jon Snow." This might be some ironic foreshadowing that Jon isn't a mere mortal, that he'll have a second life, and it'll be Mel whose magic brings him back. And if Melisandre is actually super old, like she was in the TV show, then she isn't really a mortal either. So that line is pretty funny. The consequences of Jon's resurrection are really interesting to think about. Earlier, Val, the wildling princess, mentions that Shireen's grayscale makes her unclean. The Grey Death sleeps, only to wake again, she says. Val calls Shireen a dead girl. Her mother cannot see it, nor you, it seems. Yet death is there. Val referring to Shireen as a dead girl makes for some great foreshadowing. It also really disturbs Jon, who walks away thinking, she is wrong, she must be wrong. Grayscale is not so deadly as she claims, not in children. While Shireen's grayscale might have been cured, her fire god worshipping lunatic parents will send her to an early grave regardless. Well, she'll be cremated actually. One could take this conversation to mean that Val will be the one who kills Shireen, but since her motive is so heavy-handed here, it's more likely just a misdirection for the reader. When Jon awakens to find that Shireen's death accidentally paid for his life, he'll probably be furious. It's nearly impossible to predict how Jon will behave post-resurrection. Catelyn Stark comes back hell-bent on violent revenge against the Freys and Lannisters. Beric Dondarrion says that each time he comes back, his memory of his past self fades. George Martin has called Beric a wight animated by fire instead of by ice. His blood doesn't run through his veins, and his heart does not pulse. But Beric was brought back via the last kiss, administered by Thoros of Myr. Jon, according to this theory, will be brought back via a sacrifice to the Red God. Blood magic, an offering of death which inadvertently pays for his life. So when Jon comes back, will he be human again? Or will he be a fire wight like Beric, the antithesis to the ice wights Jon is meant to fight against? Or, if his spirit has been warged inside Ghost, maybe Jon will come back behaving more like a direwolf than he used to. He did remark that Ghost is more alive than I am. It's impossible to say, but one thing is certain. Jon won't come back the same person he was before. That would be too simple, too easy, and that's just not George Martin's style. Let's zoom back out to the situation at Castle Black. With Lord Commander Jon Snow murdered in a mutiny, chaos will ensue. 3 factions will emerge on the wall. First, the mutineers, those in the Night's Watch who wanted Jon Snow dead. Second, the Jon loyalists, his friends and those who are against the mutineers, as well as the thousands of wildlings who owe their safety to Jon. Third, the Baratheons, Queen Selyse and Princess Shireen, Melisandre, their roughly 50 queensmen, etc. For this section, I'll be using a map of Castle Black I created with my excellent Photoshop skills. The exact locations of every building are not known. and there are probably some other, smaller, perhaps broken down buildings not mentioned in the text. But this is my best approximation of where the named buildings are in relation to each other, the Wall, and the King's Road. Jon gives his speech about wanting to ride south and kill Ramsay in the Shield Hall of Castle Black. He hears 1-1 roar outside Harden's tower. This is where Val, the wildling princess, lives. She has wildling guards to protect her, and 1-1 the giant sleeps there as well. Jon discovers that 1-1 has killed Sir Patrick, a knight who came north with Stannis. Patrick was romantically interested in Val, and he probably knows about the wildling custom of stealing a woman to marry her. Upon hearing of Queen Selyse's desire to wed Sir Patrick to Val, Jon tells Selyse the suitor risks a savage beating if he is caught by the woman's kin, and worse than that if she herself finds him unworthy. So in all likelihood, Sir Patrick was trying to enter Harden's tower and steal Val, but Val found him unworthy and 1-1 protected her. Moments later, the daggers in the dark murder Jon Snow. He bleeds on the ground outside Harden's tower. Remember that Jon didn't race over to Harden's tower alone. His guards, Horse and Rory, followed him, and men poured from the surrounding keeps and towers. He was killed in front of a bunch of people, namely Leathers, the wildling turned master-at-arms of Castle Black, who was trying to calm down 1-1. Of course, we didn't get a Melisandre POV after the mutiny to confirm Jon's death. There is a chance that Jon's wounds are cauterized and stitched up immediately by Val, Melisandre, or someone who knows something about medicine. When asked about Jon's death in an interview, George responded, "Oh, you think he's dead, do you?" But he also revealed that Melisandre's vision of daggers in the dark was written and planned 10 years before A Dance with Dragons was published. So Jon's death via mutiny is part of the core of George Martin's story. He planned it for years and knows exactly what he wants to do with him. Based on these remarks, I think it's most likely that Jon's body will be found dead, but his spirit warged inside Ghost. So let's examine where exactly people are when Jon is killed. Val the wildling princess is in Harden's tower. Leathers and a group of Night's Watchmen, Queensmen, and Free Folk came out of the buildings near Harden's tower to witness the commotion. Tormund Giantsbane and 200 wildlings are in the Shield Hall, where Jon has just given his speech. However, Bowen Marsh, Othel Yarwick, and their men left as soon as Jon read the pink letter. As did Melisandre and the Queen's men, likely heading to Queen Selyse in the King's Tower. Jon then leaves as well to speak to Selyse, but hears 1-1's roar before he gets there. So by the time of 1-1's roar, only the wildlings remained in the Shield Hall. The original attendees of Jon's meeting are a mixture of wildlings and Night's Watch, but we're told that the wildlings outnumbered the crows 5-1. With a 5-1 ratio, totaling around 300 men, there are about 240 wildlings and 48 Night's Watchmen inside the Shield Hall. By this point in the story, the Night's Watch is down to around 538 men in total. There were exactly 589 during the election for Lord Commander, but some brothers left and or died, so there are around 538 remaining. Of course, they're not all at Castle Black. I've highlighted the castles on the wall that are garrisoned. We don't have exact numbers, but there are, at the very least, 100 men each at the Shadow Tower and Eastwatch. Jon garrisons Icemark with 30 people, 10 of which were Stannis' men. Assuming around 20 people were sent to garrison each of the other castles on this list, Castle Black has around 218 Night's Watchmen, but probably quite a bit fewer. Now, let's count the wildlings. About 1,000 free folk pass through the wall after Stannis defeats them. When Tormund passes through the wall, that adds another 3,119 people. Not all of them are fighters, but it's worth noting that they'll follow Tormund, and Tormund follows Jon, meaning there are thousands of wildlings who will be upset at Jon's death. Jon's friends will be upset too, but he sent most of his friends away to garrison other castles. Pip is at Eastwatch by the Sea. Dolorous Ed and Iron Emmett are at Longbarrow, and Halder and Toad are at the Shadow Tower. Satin remains at Castle Black. It should be noted that the only Night's Watchmen who were vocal in their dislike of Jon were Marsh, Yarwick, Wick Whittlestick, and a few others who followed them out of the Shield Hall, as well as whoever stabbed Jon with the fourth knife, the one he didn't even feel. The rest of the Watch is either supportive or neutral of Jon, making the mutineers' decision quite dumb. They will be cut immediately by those outside Hardin's tower, and probably held captive until they either select a new Lord Commander or until Jon is resurrected, whichever comes first. There is a chance that Bowen Marsh had a plan. Wait until Jon leaves the Shield Hall meeting, execute him, and then set the Shield Hall on fire, burning the roughly 200 wildlings inside. The Shield Hall is made of wood and could be set ablaze pretty easily. However, thousands of wildlings pass through the wall. Killing 200 of them and hoping for the best is still a dumb plan. More realistically, Bowen Marsh and his conspirators had been cooking up this plan for a while, and acted quickly when this opportunity arose. Jon was separated from Ghost, and walking in front of his guards. No matter how adept a schemer you think Marsh was, the Jon loyalists vastly outnumbered the mutineers, and after a brief bout of chaos, Castle Black will settle down, and the mutineers will have lost. The timeline surrounding the end of A Dance with Dragons and the beginning of The Winds of Winter is a bit confusing. In the final Jon chapter of Dance, he receives Ramsay's pink letter, in which Bolton claims that Stannis is dead. However, in the first Theon preview chapter of The Winds of Winter, Stannis is still camped in the Crofters village, and the Battle of Ice has not yet occurred. This is because George sometimes places chapters slightly out of order to maintain a little mystery. He said that Theon chapter from Winds actually occurs before the events at the end of A Dance with Dragons. So let's try to estimate exactly when in Dance this Theon chapter is taking place. Jon has 13 chapters in A Dance with Dragons. In Jon 9, he learns that Arnulf Karstark intends to betray Stannis. So in Jon 10, he mentions that he sent ravens to Stannis, informing him that the Karstarks are no good. Jon sent those ravens before Jon 10. In The Winds of Winter, Theon 1, Stannis knows that Karstark plans to betray him, so he imprisons them, suggesting he received Jon's raven. Based on this, The Winds of Winter, Theon 1, takes place between A Dance with Dragons, Jon 9, and Jon 10. Jon gets murdered in his 13th and final chapter, meaning Stannis' battle has already occurred. Jon just didn't know about it yet. Ramsay's pink letter said their battle lasted for 7 days, which tells us that when Jon died, the Battle of Ice occurred a little over 7 days ago. But the letter might be unreliable. A week-long battle between Stannis and Ramsay sounds unlikely. But we'll talk about this more in the Battle of Ice section. My point with all this timeline talk is that Justin Massey is already on his way to Castle Black before Jon's death, and will likely arrive very soon after his death. In that Theon preview chapter, King Stannis commands Sir Justin Massey to escort Tycho Nestoris back to the Iron Bank of Braavos. Once in the Free Cities, Massey is told to hire 20,000 sellswords and bring them back to fight for Stannis. Jane Poole, still acting as Arya Stark, travels with them, as does Alysane Mormont. The two ladies are meant to stay under Jon's protection at Castle Black, while Justin Massey heads to Braavos. Remember, Jon is still alive at this point. How long will it take Justin Massey's party to reach the Wall? In Book 1, it took Jon, Benjen, and Tyrion at least 18 days to make the journey. They were still on the King's Road on the 18th night. However, they traveled directly north along the King's Road from Winterfell during mild weather. Stannis' camp at the Crofters village is west of Winterfell in the Wolfswood, meaning it would take additional time to reach the King's Road. And a great blizzard has been ravaging the north for at least 9 days, making the terrain more difficult to travel through. It would take Justin Massey longer than Jon and Tyrion's 18 days to get from Winterfell to Castle Black. We don't know exactly how many days before Jon's death Justin Massey starts heading to Castle Black, but regardless, he must arrive after Jon's death during the ensuing chaos. I think the most likely outcome is that Alysane Mormont stays in the north while Justin Massey brings fake Arya with him to Braavos, keeping her under his own protection since Jon is now dead. The real Arya is already in Braavos, and her job with the House of Black and White requires that she spend lots of time wandering about the city. She already ran into Samwell Tarly and Dareon, and Arya killed Dareon after hearing that he abandoned the Night's Watch. This proves that Arya pays attention to interesting new people coming into Braavos, and that she still cares about her past life as a Stark. She remembers that the punishment for deserting the Night's Watch is death. So it's very possible that Arya will hear about Arya Stark coming into the city, and she'll recognize her as Jane Poole, Sansa's childhood friend. This is a perfect opportunity for Arya to learn about Jon's death, the aftermath of which Justin Massey, Jane Poole, and Tycho Nestoris just witnessed. This can move Arya's story back to Westeros, where she may intend to avenge Jon. That's an efficient way for George to wrap up Arya's Bravo storyline, and get the northern plotline moving quicker by putting Arya and Jon, and Rickon, and Bran sort of, in the same place again. As for Justin Massey's mission, it may or may not be doomed. Stannis tells him to hire all the sellswords he can find in Braavos, and then travel south to the disputed lands, if he needs to, in order to hire the Golden Company. The Golden Company is already in Westeros, fighting in the Stormlands for Aegon Targaryen. Before that, the Golden Company broke their contract with Myr, as the three daughters of Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh were about to begin a war. But later, Cersei hears that this war never happens, so all the smaller sellsword companies who would have fought are now free to be hired. This is a list of all the known sellsword companies. Note that the Stormcrows, Windblown, and Second Sons are fighting for Dany in Meereen, and the Company of the Cat and Long Lances are fighting for the slavers against Dany in Meereen. If Justin Massey can hire all these other companies, that could earn him around 20,000 men. Of particular interest are the Company of the Rose and the Wolf Pack. The former was established by immigrants from the north who disagreed with Torrhen Stark's submission to Aegon the Conqueror. The latter was also established by Northmen, this time after the Dance of the Dragons. These two companies may be inclined to join Stannis' war in the north, his war to save the north from the others. Stannis notes that Massey has a pleasing manner and a glib tongue, so he should be persuasive. Realistically though, George Martin is awfully inconsistent with numbers, and may simply invent new sellsword companies for Justin to hire.
That's interesting.
It's hard to say whether or not Justin Massey will be successful. He's only a knight, not a lord. He lost his rights to Stonedance after remaining loyal to Stannis when they lost at the Blackwater. He tells Stannis that sellswords would rather follow a lord than a knight, but Stannis refuses to make him a lord. He tells Stannis he wants to marry Asha Greyjoy, and eventually reclaim the Iron Islands in her name, but Stannis says not until after he returns from his mission. Despite not being granted a lordship or Asha Greyjoy, Justin Massey is fiercely loyal to Stannis' cause. Before leaving, he tells Stannis, "If there is to be a battle, my place is here with you." However, his faith in Stannis' chances of winning may be low. He says, "If we march, we will die by the hundreds." But Stannis is very firm about wanting sellswords. He's not sending Justin Massey on a pointless errand. He tells Justin that even if he hears in Essos that Stannis has died, hire the sellswords anyway, and continue the fight in the name of Princess Shireen. If Justin Massey sails back to Westeros with 20,000 sellswords in the middle of the Winds of Winter, what will he come back to? The entire political landscape could change in this time. Aegon Targaryen may have taken the throne from the Lannisters. Stannis and/or a resurrected Jon Snow may have beaten the Boltons, and Stannis may be dead after sacrificing his daughter to R'hllor. The Starks might be back in Winterfell. What will Justin Massey and these 20,000 sellswords do? They'll continue on with Stannis' true goal, to save the North from the others and their army of the dead. This was always his plan. Win the North to his cause for the Iron Throne by saving the North from the Long Night. Jon Snow can add these sellswords to the defense of humanity, and even if Stannis is dead, his legacy tarnished by the killing of Shireen, his desire to save the North can live on through Justin Massey, his loyal, landless knight. At least, that's how I see this story going. I think Justin Massey's future is foreshadowed in Fire and Blood, when a different knight, Sir Marston Waters, goes on a similar mission 170 years prior. This story does spoil the end of House of the Dragon, so skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid that. Near the end of Aegon II's reign, he sent a Kingsguard named Sir Marston Waters to Essos, intending that he hire sellswords to fight against the remaining black forces who were marching against King's Landing. But Aegon was promptly murdered, and by the time Sir Marston got back, Aegon III replaced Aegon II. The war was over, and his king was dead. When Massey returns to Essos, I think he'll be in the same position. The war against House Bolton will have ended, and Stannis will have died. It's a pretty neat parallel. Back in the north, Alysane Mormont will likely have stayed behind when Justin Massey goes to Braavos with fake Arya. Stannis wanted her to stay at Castle Black with fake Arya under Jon Snow's protection, as Arya's female companion. The deception would have ended when Jon realized that fake Arya was actually Jane Poole. But of course, Jon is murdered before Alysane and Jane get there. Alysane is the heir to Bear Island, and a fierce warrior. Alysane does likely believe that Jane Poole really is Arya, the last known child of Eddard Stark, and heir to Winterfell. House Mormont is loyal to House Stark, as Lyanna mentions in her letter to Stannis. So it's not impossible that Alysane would accompany Justin Massey and fake Arya to Braavos for added protection, but she might suit a higher purpose in the northern storyline. Her mother, Mage Mormont, was in the south with Robb Stark. Shortly before the Red Wedding, she attended Robb's meeting and signed his will. Earlier in this chapter, Robb mentions that he plans to legitimize Jon Snow and name him heir to the North if Robb should die without a child. Catelyn argues against Jon, but Robb is firm. Later in the chapter, he pulls out the document for everyone to sign. Of course, Robb does not say out loud that Jon is his heir. The way it's left slightly ambiguous means he technically could have named anyone. One theory suggests he named his mother Catelyn his heir, for example. Her internal monologue says Robb caught her in a trap, leading some readers to believe that trap was naming her heir. Though, more likely, the trap was simply that Robb named his heir in front of all his lords, so that Catelyn wouldn't be able to speak against him and voice her distrust of Jon, thus making Robb look weak. At least, that's how I read it. So for the scope of this video, let's work with the assumption that Robb did, in fact, name Jon Snow his heir, like he said he was going to do. Robb sent Mage Mormont and Galbert Glover to Howland Reed in the Neck, so they could inform the Reeds about Robb's plan to retake Moat Cailin. Then Robb dies in the Red Wedding, and we have no POV character in the Neck right now. We don't know for certain if Mage and Galbert made it to Howland Reed, but it seems likely that they did, because they haven't been mentioned since. Alysane also implies that her mother is alive. She tells Asha Greyjoy that Lyra and Jory are with our mother. If Alysane thought Mage was dead, she'd have said her sisters were with our mother. This suggests that Mage, Lyra, or Jorel could have sent communication back to Bear Island. Perhaps a message saying that Jon Snow is the rightful king in the north. This would track with Lyanna Mormont's letter to Stannis, which stated, Bear Island knows no king but the king in the north, whose name is Stark. Maybe this is just northerners being stubborn, or maybe Lyanna knows that Jon is their rightful king. So does Alysane Mormont, who is now at Castle Black in the wake of Jon Snow's death, know about Robb's will? If she does, she could tell Jon after he's resurrected. Or maybe she doesn't know. Maybe she'll go back to Stannis, or back home on Bear Island. Maybe she'll go to Braavos to protect the girl she thinks is Arya Stark. Who knows? Let's move on. Readers call Stannis' upcoming battle against the Boltons the Battle of Ice. Baratheon is camped at a crofter's village, a 3-day ride from Winterfell. The blizzard has forced Stannis to remain there for over 20 days. Food is scarce, and according to Ned Woods, a native of the Wolfswood, the village lakes have been overfished. The ice punctured with so many holes that people will fall through when walking over them. Stannis is low on food and short on time. Luckily, he expects the Bolton army to arrive soon. Theon estimates that Roose Bolton has at least 5,000 or 6,000 men, but Theon guesses that Bolton will keep at least half of them inside Winterfell to protect the castle. That means around 3,000 men will be attacking Stannis in 3 groups: the Frey army, the Manderly army, and an army of Northmen led by Ramsay. Stannis left Castle Black with 1,500 men. He convinced 3,500 Northerners to join him, including Mountain Clansmen, the Glovers, the Mormonts, and about 450 Karstarks. So Stannis' army totals around 5,450 men. This is more than the roughly 3,000 who will attack him. The events of the Battle of Ice can be split into 2 major theories. First, the Night Lamp theory from Kent Hughes. You will find a link in the description to read his words directly. Stannis says he plans to use the Crofters' village's natural defenses to his advantage when the Boltons attack. Here's an estimated sketch of the village. 2 lakes, one of them larger, with islands of trees. One such island has a weirwood tree. The village is in between these lakes. It includes a few huts, a long hall, and a watchtower. The night lamp theory suggests that Stannis will light a beacon atop the watchtower that draws the Frey army's attention across the frozen lake. Once the Freys are crossing the lake, they will fall through and drown in the freezing cold water. There is a ton of textual evidence for this. There are at least 4 different mentions of people falling through the ice or carving holes into the ice of these lakes. Also, Stannis already had this idea of blinding an enemy in the past. In Book 2, he wanted Renly's army to attack him while they charged directly into the rising sun, making them half blind, according to Randall Tarley. Stannis doesn't get the chance to use this plan. His shadow baby does its thing first. But it does show that Stannis has thought about using the distraction of light against an approaching army. The night lamp theory gets its name from one of the beacons on the 3 sisters. When Davos meets with Godric Borrell, the sisterman admits that they would sometimes use false lights to draw ship captains to their doom. And Stannis knows that the Borrells use this strategy. He once threatened to hang Godric if the night lamp ever went out when his ships needed to rely on it. So we have repeated mentions of holes in the ice of these lakes. We have a prior example of Stannis wanting to use a light distraction in battle, and we have proof that Stannis knows about this night lamp strategy. The Freys have about 1,400 men according to Theon, while the Manderlys have around 300. In the Asha fragment of The Winds of Winter, an unreleased sneak preview of Asha's POV, we learn that the Freys have already left Winterfell and killed Mors Umber, who was camped just outside the Winterfell walls. Seemingly, the Frey army will reach Stannis first, led by Hostine, who is a big, fierce warrior, but not a capable commander. Stannis refers to him as Sir Stupid. Hostine's army will be lured by Stannis' trap, and when the Manderlys arrive, Wyman will have the perfect opportunity to switch sides. We know Wyman Manderly is faking his support of Roose Bolton. In Book 5, he tells Davos that the North remembers, and the Mummers' farce is almost done. He sends Davos to find Rickon Stark on Skagos, and once he does, Wyman plans to bend the knee to Stannis and install Rickon as Lord of Winterfell. He's been plotting behind Roose Bolton's back, waiting for the perfect time to turn cloak. So with the Frey army defeated and the Manderly switching sides, Stannis will have won the Battle of Ice. Except for the Third Army, the one led by Ramsay Bolton. However, Stannis has a perfect opportunity to evade Ramsay, forego having to lay siege to Winterfell, and strike against Roose Bolton from within the castle. Here's the second Battle of Ice theory, popularized by Brynden B. Fish. His entire blog is linked in the description. Stannis has hinted at faking his own death. Before Justin Massey leaves, Stannis tells him, "In Braavos, you may hear that I am dead. It may even be true. You shall find my sellswords nonetheless." Stannis' death may be true, implying that it may also be untrue. This plants the idea of Stannis having a false death. Also, after defeating the initial Frey army, Stannis will have Wyman Manderly on his side. What did Wyman Manderly do in Book 5? He faked Davos Seaworth's death in order to get the Lannisters to send his son Willis back to White Harbor. This has worked out brilliantly so far. Wyman has his son back, and the whole world, including Stannis for now, believes Davos is dead, whereas he's actually on a secret mission to fetch Rickon Stark. Since Wyman has done this once, perhaps he'll do it again with Stannis. The Manderly army will go back to Winterfell and claim they've killed Stannis and taken his remaining men captive. They can even reveal Lightbringer, Stannis' magic sword, a symbol of his defeat. To corroborate Stannis' death even further, he can use the Karstarks to his advantage. Recall that Roose Bolton plans to use Arnulf Karstark to infiltrate Stannis' army and betray him. But thanks to a warning from Jon Snow, Stannis learns about the Karstark betrayal, imprisons their maester, and keeps the maester's ravens safe. Perhaps Stannis will have the maester send a report back to the Boltons in Winterfell that the Karstark betrayal worked and Stannis was defeated, at which point the Boltons will open the gates, believing it to be their own Karstark men coming back to Winterfell, but it will actually be Stannis. Once inside, Stannis can strike against the enemy forces and take the castle. Remember that the lords inside Winterfell are not necessarily loyal to House Bolton. Hother Umber is only supporting them because the Greatjon is held captive by the Freys. Barbary Dustin believes Ramsay killed her beloved nephew, Domeric. The rest of them, Stout and Riswell for example, have no reason to stay loyal to Bolton once Stannis emerges. Taking Winterfell from inside should be easy for King Stannis. Based on the contradictions between the Theon preview chapter for Winds and the final Jon chapter in Dance, it appears that the Battle of Ice will happen before Jon receives the pink letter and dies. So that's why the mystery of who wrote the pink letter depends so heavily on Stannis' actions. Let's look at the possibilities. First, let's assume these popular theories are true. Stannis beats the Freys and takes Winterfell from within, possibly by faking his own death. In this scenario, for Ramsay to have written the letter, he would have needed to stay at Winterfell during the initial wave of Frey and Manderly troops, and hastily write the letter to Jon. With the battle not yet over, this means Ramsay lied about killing Stannis and taking Lightbringer, wanting to trick Jon into coming south. But if Ramsay's army left Winterfell before Stannis took the castle, he would be trapped outside and unable to send the letter. So the second scenario is that a combination of Winterfell folks wrote the pink letter instead. Stannis, Mance Rayder, and potentially Theon. Their motive would be to trick Jon into fighting Ramsay's army from the north instead of Stannis chasing Ramsay himself. Stannis would be extra desperate for Jon's help if the Northern Lords abandon him after realizing Lord Eddard's little girl, Arya, is not in Winterfell. Arya was their motivation for helping Stannis in the first place. This scenario also explains the mention of Val and Mance's baby, two people Ramsay probably wouldn't have known about, but Stannis and Mance would. If Theon helped Stannis write the letter, it fits with what he told Stannis about Ramsay back in the Crofters' village. He wants his bride back. He wants his reek. This is the exact phrasing of the pink letter. The problem with this scenario is the matter of Jon's resurrection. I previously suggested that Shireen's death will pay for Jon's life, to wake a stone dragon. If Stannis has to be at Castle Black to burn Shireen, how could he have been in Winterfell writing the pink letter? For this scenario to work, Stannis would need to send the letter, Jon dies shortly after receiving it, and then Stannis goes back to the wall to figure out why Jon never came south to help him. With Jon dead, Stannis' northern support crumbling, Ramsay still out there with an army, and the others heading south, this could make Stannis desperate enough to burn Shireen, and accidentally awaken Jon Snow. There is a third scenario as well. It really was just Ramsay who wrote the pink letter, but he had a co-author. Two reasons some readers say it couldn't have been Ramsay are the smear of pink wax rather than a true Bolton seal, and the use of the term crow. Well, Ramsay sends two letters earlier in the story, one to Asha Greyjoy and another one to Jon Snow. George Martin's descriptions of the two letters are nearly identical, tightly rolled and sealed with a button of hard pink wax. The pink letter, however, is described as sealed with a smear of hard pink wax. So the pink letter is not described as tightly rolled, and does not use a pink button, but rather a pink smear. Recall that it's Clydas who hands Jon the pink letter. This makes sense, because ever since Maester Aemon and Sam left, Clydas is left in charge of the Ravens. But it's worth noting the letter could have been tampered with before Jon read it. Clydas is shaking when he brings Jon the letter. Why would he be so scared that he's shaking? Because Bowen Marsh and the mutineers modified the letter before Jon could read it. Upon receiving the initial pink letter from Ramsay, which might have left out some of the details he shouldn't have known, like Val the Wildling Princess and the baby, Marsh added those details in and made the letter as inflammatory as possible, with constant mentions of Arya, and calling Jon a bastard. Jon's brothers on the wall know what will affect him the most. Bowen Marsh tampered with the pink letter, knowing it would make Jon want to leave the wall, giving them the perfect opportunity to kill him for abandoning the watch. This option also explains the smear of pink wax. The mutineers had to reuse the original button of pink wax, so now it's just a messy smear, and the letter is not tightly rolled. To address the use of the term crow, I think this is just a misconception by a lot of readers. We don't only hear wildlings call the Night's Watchmen crows. A knight from King's Landing calls Yoren a crow in Book 2, for example. It's a relatively common epithet for a brother of the Night's Watch, and it's not hard to believe Ramsay would use the word. Personally, I think Ramsay plus Bowen Marsh makes for the most convincing and reasonable pink letter theory. Stannis' entire story has been driving him towards burning Shireen. In Book 3, Stannis considered burning his nephew, Edric Storm, until Davos rescued the boy and took away Stannis' choice. He said that Edric is just one boy, but the darkness was coming to devour them all, the night that never ends. He said that Edric would be one sacrifice to save 1,000,000 from the dark. He accepts that sacrifice is never easy, or else it is no true sacrifice. This means that Stannis will sacrifice Shireen if he thinks it can save the world. Stannis believes Melisandre's visions. He truly believes he can wake dragons from stone. He said that if only he had a dragon at the Blackwater, he'd have won the Iron Throne. It would be a wondrous thing to see stone come to life, Stannis says, and to mount a dragon. Believing that Shireen's death would grant him a dragon to defeat the others, Stannis will do his duty. But Jon Snow is the dragon who will awaken. This is all just one theory regarding Jon's and Stannis' interconnected plotlines, using the information we currently have. There are so many different possibilities, so let me know what you think will happen in the comments. My goal here isn't to convince you how Stannis will win, or how Jon will come back, but rather to illustrate how this complex situation in the North can lead to so many different outcomes. It's not about whose theory is right, it's just about having fun with the material. And if that material were ever finished, then I wouldn't have to make a depressingly long YouTube video analyzing every plotline in the North.
And I'm still working on the book. That's the question you all want to ask. Don't fucking ask it.
Let's move on. We've discussed Wyman Manderly's motivations through the other sections of this video. Wyman also has a secret fleet of ships hidden up the White Knife River, so let's discuss all that. First, Rickon Stark. Davos leaves White Harbor for Skagos shortly after his fourth and final A Dance with Dragons chapter. That's before everything we've discussed so far. Before the Battle of Ice, before the Blizzard, before Ramsay even marries fake Arya, and only shortly after Stannis leaves the Wall in the first place. So by the time of Jon's murder, Davos might already be on Skagos in search of Rickon. During an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson on Star Talk, George Martin revealed that he has an interesting take on unicorns coming up in the new books. Why does this matter? Skagos is said to have unicorns. Also, Jon has a wolf dream where he sees Shaggy Dog eating a horned goat, which sounds like a unicorn on Skagos. Anyway, George's comment and Jon's dream basically confirm that Rickon is on Skagos. His wolf Shaggy Dog is feasting on unicorns, and we'll see him in the next book. My bold prediction is that Davos will eat unicorn meat while on Skagos. Second, the Manderlys have been building warships ever since Robb was still king. When Davos arrives in White Harbor, he counts 23 warships. Wyman tells him, "I have been building warships for more than a year. Some you saw, but there are as many more hidden up the White Knife." So the Manderlys have upwards of 46 warships. What will they do with this northern fleet? Wyman complains that he has no crew to sail the ships. All he has are rivermen or fisherfolk who have never sailed beyond the Bight. That's why he needs to use Davos, a renowned smuggler, to covertly find Rickon. But there actually are some skilled sailors in the north right now. This brings us to the Ironborn. Asha and Theon are both with Stannis at the Crofters' village, and we'll discuss them later. First, let's recall Dagmer Cleftjaw, the man who helped Theon take Winterfell by attacking Torrhen Square and drawing out Winterfell's garrison long enough for Theon to take the castle. Well, Dagmer ends up going back to Torrhen Square and capturing it for good. Asha even mentions to Stannis that she could deliver the Ironborn to his cause. When the dust settles at Winterfell, and Jon holds the north, he can make use of Asha and Dagmer to sail this northern fleet built by Wyman Manderly. Most importantly, they can rescue the thousands of trapped wildlings at Hardhome, who Jon was trying to save before his death. Cotter Pike and his ships from Eastwatch failed, but perhaps the Ironborn, sailing Manderly's fleet, could overcome the dead things in the water and bring the free folk south to defend against the others. Pike tells Jon to send help by land since the sea is being racked by storms, but sailing through storms is the Ironborn's specialty. All those interwoven plots from past books, Theon and Dagmer invading the north, Wyman building ships for King Robb, Asha being taken captive by Stannis, and wildlings fleeing to their doom at Hardhome, all of this can be brought together in the Winds of Winter. Theon is hard to predict. Asha Greyjoy dares Stannis to execute Theon himself in front of a weirwood tree for his crimes in the north, like when he killed the two Miller's boys and said they were Bran and Rickon. Theon slew Lord Eddard's sons, Asha says. Give him to Lord Eddard's gods, the old gods of the north. Give him to the tree. Ravens begin to squawk, and Theon hears them call his name. The tree, Theon, Theon, Theon. The Winterfell Heart Tree speaks to Theon throughout Book 5. He asks the old gods to let him die as Theon, not Reek. But I think the Battle of Ice will begin before Stannis can kill Theon, and he and Asha will survive. Theon's arc isn't complete yet. He just escaped Ramsay and is starting to remember his own name. I think that before Theon can die, he needs to help the Stark family. He's not much of a fighter anymore. Ramsay took 3 of his fingers, and he can no longer hold a bow. But maybe Theon will keep Bran and Rickon safe during the long night. This was one of the few things I think Season 8 did well. I don't know what Theon will do, but everybody wants Theon dead. Even Theon himself doesn't think he should be alive. So, of course, he will survive a lot longer than we think. Bran Stark has been in Bloodraven's cave since his 3rd chapter in A Dance with Dragons. This was also his final chapter. This chapter spans over the course of weeks, and then we hear nothing else from Bran. Anything more would reveal too much. We have no idea what Bran will have seen by the time he gets a new chapter, which makes his story impossible to predict. So instead, let's look at the tone of his story, and what kind of person Bran is becoming. In Book 5, Bran starts to regularly skin change into Hodor. This is one of the 3 abominations Varamir says a skin changer must not commit. A skin changer must never eat human meat, must never mate with wolf as wolf, and the worst abomination of all, a skin changer must never seize the body of a human. Bran has already committed 2 out of the 3 abominations. Hodor can't consent to Bran using his body as he pleases, but Bran doesn't care. He says, I just want to be strong again for a while. I'll give it back, the way I always do. Bran knows it's wrong, but he does it anyway. Whenever he reaches out to Hodor's mind, he curls up and hides like a beaten dog. Like Stannis burning Shireen, Hodor's hold the door moment is going to happen in the books as well. George has said the scene will involve Hodor using the sword he took from the Winterfell crypts to hold off the army of the dead when they find Bran in Bloodraven's cave. Whereas in Game of Thrones, Hodor literally held the door, in the books, Hodor will fight the enemy with a sword. Recall that, before his fall, Bran was trained with a sword, and since he's been skin-changing Hodor, perhaps Bran will be inside Hodor's mind when the hold the door moment comes. Bran can wield a sword like the knight he always wanted to be, except he'll be doing it inside Hodor's body. Creepy. The Isle of Faces is mentioned in Bran's story. This is the historic island in the middle of the God's Eye, south of Harrenhal. It's filled with weirwood trees, and it was where the first men and the children of the forest signed their peace treaty during the Dawn Age. When Mira Reed tells Bran the story of a Crannogman, likely her father, Howland, who once visited the Isle of Faces, Bran thinks that he could go there too one day. If Bran looks through the eyes of a weirwood tree on the Isle of Faces, he might find Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, like he did in the HBO series. Rhaegar kidnapped, or consensually confiscated Lyanna, fewer than 10 leagues from Harrenhal, so maybe they went to the Isle of Faces, a sacred land of the old gods, who Lyanna Stark worshipped. In the official 2024 A Song of Ice and Fire calendar, with art commissioned by and presumably approved by George Martin, Rhaegar and Lyanna are depicted in a forest goofing around on a weirwood. Maybe this is the Isle of Faces, and Bran will look at them through the weirwood tree. I'm not sure, but I am sure that I do not know what's going on with Bran's story. At the very least, George Martin has confirmed that the Isle of Faces will be explored further in the future. Bloodraven tells Bran that he'll be able to see well beyond the trees themselves, meaning that after some more practice, Bran won't just be able to see what happens in front of a weirwood. He can see anything, anywhere, anytime. Like the Tower of Joy, mayhaps. The only time we read about the Tower of Joy in the books is Ned's fever dream. The text leaves out his fight against Arthur Dayne, and his conversation with Lyanna in the tower. George Martin said that Ned's fever dream isn't necessarily reliable. so Bran could reveal the full truth of the Tower of Joy. Ned told Bran, "The finest knight I ever saw was Sir Arthur Dane, who fought with a blade called Dawn, forged from the heart of a fallen star. They called him the Sword of the Morning, and he would have killed me but for Howland Reed." So Bran knows Howland Reed saved his father's life, but he doesn't know how. Maybe he'll go to the Tower of Joy with his green sight, and he'll witness Lyanna and Ned's conversation. Not because it happened in the TV show, but because the Tower of Joy was a mystery introduced in the very first book. There's a reason George kept it a secret, and Bran can reveal that secret in the Winds of Winter. Even if we don't get the R+L=J reveal from Bran's vision, this does reintroduce Howland Reed into the story. A man who knows so many spoilers that George has kept him hidden in a swamp for 5 books, though George has confirmed that Howland will appear in the future. In Book 3, Catelyn Stark mails Ned's bones north to be buried in the Winterfell crypts. But in Book 5, Lady Dustin mentions that she's been keeping an eye on the neck, waiting for the bones to be brought through. They haven't yet, meaning Howland Reed might still have them at Greywater Watch. He might also have Maid Mormont and Galbert Glover, who Robb sent to Howland Reed before the Red Wedding. Both of them witness Robb's will, and know who he named as heir. We're led to believe that person is Jon Snow, the same boy whose birth Howland Reed saw at the Tower of Joy. There's a very good chance that Howland knows about Jon's parents, knows about Robb's will naming him heir to the North, which doesn't really matter, and has his best friend Ned Stark's bones. I made this video that goes into my theory in a lot more detail, but essentially, once the Starks have retaken Winterfell from the Boltons, Howland Reed can emerge from the neck and bring Ned's bones for the Stark kids to bury in the crypts. And I even think that he might have a conversation with Jon Snow in the crypts, where the statue of his mother stands. The crypts have been invading Jon's dreams for nearly the entire story. They're calling to him, daring him to come down. What will he find? Howland Reed, with Ned's bones and the answers to all Jon's questions. In this final section, let's briefly look at all the smaller plotlines in the North. First, Alyce Karstark comes to Castle Black in Book 5 to escape her evil great-uncle, who is trying to force Alyce to marry his son, Cregan, and take Carhold. So Jon Snow helps her, and she instead marries Sigorn, Magnar of Thenn. They plan to march back to Carhold with his 200 men, and Alyce believes the castle will open its gates to her. The only thing that might put a wrench in her plan is her brother, Haryon Karstark. Haryon was captured at the Green Fork, and is a prisoner at Maidenpool. Unless the Lannisters decide to execute him, Haryon is still the Lord of Carhold. He can come north and claim his seat, or else Carhold will be ruled by the new House Thenn. Benjen Stark went missing in Book 1, and is a giant mystery box. I've made a dedicated video on him already, so I'll just say that I think he's coming back. He's a lot like Howland Reed, in that George has to keep him off page because he simply knows too many spoilers. If he returns, I think he'll have some knowledge about the others, assuming he's been investigating them beyond the wall. And of course, he was at the tourney of Harrenhal and spent time with Lyanna, so there's a chance he knows about Jon's parents as well. Watch this video if you want. There's also hundreds of wildling women and children in Braavos. They were captured by slavers at Hardhome, but then Braavos seized their ship because they're against slavery. Arya knows about the wildlings. Maybe she'll hear news about Jon Snow from them, although they wouldn't know he died. Justin Massey is going to Braavos to hire sellswords, so maybe he'll bring back these captured freefolk with him. Maybe the wildlings will just travel into mainland Essos, and Daenerys can come across them when she moves west. This could be how she learns about the others. I have no idea, but there is a bunch of wildlings in Essos now. Last, and certainly least, there seems to be a disappearing Umber army. In A Clash of Kings, Theon 5, he says the Umbers are gathering their men beyond the last river. In Theon 6, he's using a Mirish lens, essentially binoculars, to look at all the armies who have encircled Winterfell, and the Umbers are not amongst them. So what happened to them? Most of the Umbers had already gone south with Robb. By A Dance with Dragons, the old men are with Hothor Umber in Winterfell, and the young green boys are with Mors Umber on Stannis' side. So maybe back in A Clash of Kings, this mysterious Umber army died fighting the wildlings who kept attacking them from the Bay of Seals. I don't know, and it really doesn't matter. This is the longest and nerdiest video I've ever made, so let me know if you enjoy this style of documentary. Also, give me your thoughts on how you think all these plotlines will turn out in The Winds of Winter. Thanks for watching and subscribing.